Imagine walking into a room and finding it exactly as it was left 26 years ago. The television is off. The calendar on the wall reads November 1999. And on the floor near the entrance, dark stains, oxidized over decades, mark the spot where a life ended. No one cleaned it. No one moved the furniture. No one threw anything away. Because the man who once called this home made a decision that would define the next quarter century of his life. He would wait. He would keep paying rent on an empty apartment in Nagoya, Japan, and he would not let the world forget what happened here until someone answered for it. This is the story of Namiko Takaba, her husband Satoru, a killer who lived just a few kilometers away for 26 years, and a crime scene frozen in time that ultimately cracked the case wide open. November 13th, 1999, Nagoya, Japan, Nishi Ward. That morning, 32-year-old Namiko Takaba took her 2-year-old son, Kohei, to a nearby pediatric clinic. Neighbors saw her returning home just before noon. By all accounts, she was in good spirits. She and her husband Satoru had recently signed a contract on a new condominium. They were planning to have a second child. Just days earlier, she had told Satoru she was the happiest she had ever been. By 2:30 that afternoon, she was dead. The landlord's wife discovered her after noticing the front door was unlocked. Inside, the television was still playing a daytime variety show. On the kitchen table sat a bowl of miso soup and a cup of soggy instant noodles. Kohei's lunch never finished. Little Kohei himself was found unharmed, sitting beside his mother's body near the entrance hallway. Namiko had been stabbed multiple times in the neck. Investigators would later describe the attack as having a ferocious, deliberate intent. The wounds were focused, targeted. This was not a robbery gone wrong. This was personal. There were clues, though, several of them. Large bloodstains at the scene, later confirmed not to belong to Namiko, but to the attacker, who had apparently been cut during the struggle. Shoe prints leading out of the apartment and onto the street. A witness who described seeing a woman calmly walking away, apparently hiding an injured hand. And on the kitchen table, a half-drunk bottle of a lactic acid beverage, a brand the Takaba family never bought, sold only at stores roughly 30 kilometers away. The killer had brought it with her, and she left it behind. Aichi Prefectural Police mobilized. Over the following years, more than 100,000 officers would be involved in the investigation. Over 5,000 people were interviewed. The case became one of Japan's most talked about unsolved murders, but the killer was never found. Satoru Takaba moved out of the apartment. He had a toddler to raise, a life to hold together somehow. But he did not walk away from the case. He made a decision that would strike most people as extraordinary, maybe even a little heartbreaking. He kept paying rent on the apartment every month for 26 years. He never let anyone clean it. He never cleared out the furniture. The bloodstains stayed on the floor. The calendar stayed on the wall. His reasoning was practical and deeply personal at the same time. If the apartment was cleaned, repainted, rented to someone else, the evidence was gone. The crime scene, gone. And whatever chance remained of solving Namiko's murder, gone with it. In total, he would spend over 22 million yen, more than 145,000 US dollars, keeping that apartment exactly as it was on November 13th, 1999. But he didn't just wait quietly. Satoru distributed flyers in the neighborhood around the apartment every year on the anniversary of Namiko's death. He gave interviews, he went on television. He became, in the eyes of the Japanese public, a symbol of a particular kind of grief, Not the kind that collapses inward, but the kind that refuses to stop pushing. "If I cry and grieve," he said in one interview shortly after the murder, "that is just giving the killer what they want." He also became an advocate for legal change. Japan at the time had a 15-year statute of limitations on murder, meaning that if a killer was not caught within 15 years, they could not be prosecuted. Satoru and other victims' families pushed back against this, arguing that cold cases, by their nature, take time. In 2010, after years of advocacy, Japan abolished the statute of limitations for murder entirely. Without that change, whoever killed Namiko could have walked free regardless of the evidence. 3 years after the murder, advancing DNA technology brought a significant development. Scientists re-examined the blood found at the scene and confirmed it did not belong to Namiko. It belonged to the killer. The attacker had bled at the scene and left their DNA behind. They just didn't yet know whose DNA it was. Kumiko Yasufuku was born in 1956. She and Satoru Takaba had attended the same high school in Aichi Prefecture, and they were members of the same soft tennis club. By all accounts, she had feelings for him. She gave him a letter and Valentine's Day chocolates, confessing those feelings. Satoru, who was interested in someone else at the time, declined gently. They remained on friendly terms, even going to watch each other's matches occasionally after moving on to different universities. But at some point, Yasufuku began showing up uninvited to the university where Satoru practiced. It happened often enough that club members noticed. Eventually, Satoru told her it would be better if she didn't come anymore. After that, they fell out of contact entirely for roughly 20 years. Then in June 1999, 5 months before Namiko's murder, they crossed paths again at a reunion of their old high school tennis club. It was the first time Satoru had seen Yasufuku in 2 decades. The meeting was brief. At some point during the reunion, Satoru mentioned which days of the week he was typically away from home for work. Investigators believe Yasufuku heard him say this. 5 months later, on a day Satoru was at work, someone knocked on Namiko Takaba's door. A woman Namiko had likely never met, had no reason to fear. And the moment that door opened, the attack began. By 2024, the case had a new investigator assigned to it. Police began a systematic re-examination, focusing on a pool of roughly 500 individuals connected to the Takaba family who had, over the years, declined to voluntarily provide DNA samples. Kumiko Yasufuku was one of them. In August 2025, police visited her and requested a sample. She refused. Then, on October 30th, 2025, something changed. Yasufuku walked into a police station in Nagoya. She provided a DNA sample. And before the results even came back, she spoke 3 words. "I murdered a woman." The DNA matched the blood found at the crime scene. Blood that had been preserved, undisturbed, in a quiet apartment for 26 years. She was formally arrested on October 31st, 2025. Satoru Takaba heard the news and had one immediate reaction: shock. Not relief, shock. "I never expected it was her," he said. "I thought the killer would have left Nagoya long ago. But it turns out she had been living near my rented apartment all along." Yasufuku was 69 years old. She had been living just a few kilometers from the preserved crime scene and from Satoru himself for the entirety of those 26 years. She told investigators that every day had been filled with anxiety, that as each anniversary of the murder approached, the dread deepened. She had carried this for more than a quarter century. On March 5th, 2026, prosecutors formally indicted Kumiko Yasufuku. She will stand trial, The apartment remains as it was. Here is where this story gets complicated, and where I want to hear what you think. Yasufuku did offer some explanation for what she did. She said that at the reunion, learning of Satoru's happy domestic life had unsettled her deeply. She said she disliked what she perceived as his attitude toward women and child rearing. She said she wanted to, in her words, make him aware of the hardships of raising a child alone. But then, she went silent. She invoked her right to remain silent with investigators and has not spoken further about her motivations. What the trial will reveal, whether she'll speak, whether her reasoning will be examined more fully, remains to be seen. So we're left with fragments. A woman who carried a torch for a man decades ago, whose life may not have gone the way she hoped, who saw him happy at a reunion and was seemingly transformed by it into something dangerous. A stranger targeted because of who she was married to. What I find most haunting about this case is not the crime itself, it's the asymmetry of it. Satoru had essentially no memory of Yasufuku. She was a face from high school, someone he'd gently turned down, someone he'd lost touch with. He had moved on entirely. And yet in her world, that connection, or rather that rejection, had apparently never fully closed. What that says about obsession, about grief, about the interior lives people carry silently for decades. I'll leave that to you. Namiko Takaba was 32 years old. She was a mother. She was, by her husband's account, the happiest she had ever been. Satoru raised their son Kohei alone. Kohei recently married, the daughter of one of Namiko's closest friends. Satoru said he could imagine exactly how happy Namiko would be. The apartment in Nishi Ward still stands. The calendar still says November 1999. Satoru said the case isn't truly over until he understands why Namiko was targeted. That question may finally get answered in court, or it may not. If you have thoughts on this case, on the motive, on what drove Yasufuku to this, on what Satoru's Vigil says about love and justice, leave them in the comments. I genuinely want to hear what you think. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves.